Hello, friends, and welcome to the Interworld podcast, where we explore the intersection of personal and collective transformation. My name is Yasha S. Wagner, and I am a PhD researcher in the field of psychology and well-being, an interspiritual practitioner and facilitator, as well as the founder of the Interworld Institute for Inner World Peace. You can learn more about our nonprofit initiatives by going to interworld.org. Today, I have the great honor and privilege of being joined by a very dear friend, Emerson Jane. Emerson, who I call Emmy, is also an incredible body worker with a doctorate in chiropractic, as well as a great deal of experience working hands-on with clients over years, including also certification training and lots of experience with the Rolfing modality, among various other modalities and trainings, including, for example, as a yoga teacher, and now is training in what's called the 360 Emergence, which is in some ways inspired by Five Rhythms dance. And actually, Emmy and I will be co-facilitating a retreat right here on our land at the Interworld Eco Village on 40 acres near Colorado Springs during the last few days of August. So I'm very excited for that retreat. It'll be called Psychosoma, and we'll go more into the details of that during the episode. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to my friend Emmy, who, by the way, is also an amazing DJ, up-and-coming dance music DJ as well. So hopefully we can touch on that. Hi, Emmy.
Hi, thanks so much, Yash.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast. How you feeling today?
Doing well, feeling good. How you feeling?
Great. Happy to be here.
Yeah, me too.
So we have a lot to explore. I don't know if I fully did justice with your bio, but I'd like to just ask you to go into a little bit of your own story, your own healing journey as a healer. I know that you can start as early as you want. I know you come from a family of healers, so maybe we start at the beginning and just then look at how did you get into chiropractic, what inspired you to go to school and get a doctorate, and yeah, what that whole path has looked like for you in life.
Totally. So yeah, I mean, my mom put me, but my sister, and actually my brother also, all in dance when we were like 3 years old. And we danced, well, me and my sister did. My brother only did it for a few years. But me and my sister danced all the dance: tap, jazz, ballet, point, hip hop, modern, until we were like 18 years old. And then soon after that, well, let's back up. I also was a competitive gymnast from the age of like 8 until the age of like 18. And I also did cheerleading in that time for like 4 years. And so I was just always in my body doing like a lot of strenuous activity and stuff. I always loved to be outside growing up. And I remember my mom taking me to all different types of practitioners, like acupuncturists, Chinese medicine docs, craniosacral massages. And then she received Rolfing. She did a lot of energy work and Rolfing and stuff prior to that too. And I remember her actually working on me when I was a kid, at nighttime, just helping me release what I know now is exactly what I do now, which is to release the fascia and the nervous system. And so then I got into yoga like soon after high school, and I found ecstatic dance soon after high school. And both of those things kind of propelled me into the direction that I am, or where I am now. I I received my yoga certification. I was teaching yoga for a few years, and then I moved out to Boulder to go to actually Naropa, which I didn't end up going to, as the universe would have it. But I originally went there for somatic psychology, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. But I had been taking all these science courses, and long story short, the universe led me to instead go to Rolfing school out in Gun Barrel or like Boulder area, and it was there that I had been through like pretty abusive relationships. Like all of my relationships were abusive, actually. And the last one was like pretty, like I was like beaten in a ditch. I was like attacked from behind and like beaten in a ditch. And I didn't realize how much that was still stored in my body until I entered Rolfing school and received 210 series. And it was like this profound processing. I started just like wailing, bawling, crying on the table. I was angry, like all this stuff just like started coming out of me. And and just being a dancer, being in my body, and then finding ecstatic dance, I realized was like giving me this like catharsis thing when I would dance too. And I was just able to reach like transcended states, like as we move. So the 360 emergence is rooted in 5 rhythms dance and um, ecstatic dance. And I found ecstatic dance first, or it found me. Um, and yeah, I was reaching these like transcendent states, and I was feeling lighter in my body and more expanded, more aware, more centered. I had better balance, like my mood was better. Not only that, like I'm like going through this experience in community with others, and it was also like confronting me of like being seen, and all of it. And that is an ever deepening process in all these modalities that we're going to go into. But so ecstatic dance. And then lo and behold, I found out about network spinal on the ecstatic dance floor with my dear friend Alec Verkulen in Boulder. And long story short, that is what I mean. When I first, he introduced it to me when I first got on not his table but another dock in Boulder. It was like my body just took its own breath. It like breathed me, or I was being breathed. And I had not experienced that before, and I also didn't realize like how much I wasn't breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time, like it wasn't that profound of a entrainment, which is what they call the network spinal um, chiropractic adjustment. They call it an entrainment, and we can go into that in a little bit. But um, the it wasn't that intense of an entrainment every time after that. But as I kept going, I became more conscious and more aware of these like little intricacies within my mind body connection that I had not previously been able to access. And it is like this like full body experience where we're working to essentially peel back layers of the nervous system to create more bandwidth within the nervous system for us to better adapt to our environment, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. But all that to say that, yeah, network spinal found me on the ecstatic dance floor, and it's honestly changed my life ever since. It's what made me go to chiropractic school. Since then, I've been under care and entrained by the founder himself, Dr. Donnie Epstein. And those experiences, let me tell you what. Whoo! I honestly can't even describe. I think I have a video of one of them, and you would just think that I was like on ecstasy on a different level. I was convulsing on my back, hysterically laughing.
Wow.
Again, like never experiencing like this. The first entrainment, I've only been entrained by him 3 or 4 times. The first one wasn't that intense physically because I hadn't really been under care for that long or consistently, but he did actually it was prior to me even entering chiropractic school. So, but the first time he did tell me like something like really profound based off of the lack of lordosis in my lower back. He was like, "Oh, you've straightened your lower back. It's because you haven't been able to depend on the masculine in your life, and so you've had to overignite your own masculine." And that was kind of the first time I'd like heard of that like so much, or let alone like, I don't know, it's just like the way in which. And yeah, and I've had very profound experiences through network spinal, and I've seen some really profound experiences happen both in my own practice and also at various events and stuff.
Beautiful. So I'm hearing, pretty amazing that it starts, perhaps even before your birth, the journey towards and through and into um, body work, healing work. Your mother was herself and is, I guess, a healer, and introduced you from your earliest memories and your siblings to what it looks like to psychosomatically tend to your wellness and not accumulate tensions, whether psychologically or physically, which is always both woven together. But instead to release them and return continuously to your natural, relaxed presence. So, that's a beautiful origin story, right? And then I'm hearing that you also underwent some severe life difficulties and experiences of abuse that imprinted themselves and in your own psyche-soma connection, right? In your own psychosomatic field, meaning your nervous system, right? Encoded themselves in things like your posture, your level of awareness in relationship to your breathing, things like this, right? So there was a contraction there, and that through coming to Boulder, going to ecstatic dance, meeting people in the community, and exploring other psychosomatic and bodywork healing modalities like Rolfing, which we'll get to. And in your journey, as I guess, I don't mean to pin a label by any means, but the archetypal kind of idea of the wounded healer journey, right, comes to mind. So in your own journey through self-healing as a road to understanding what does it mean to support others' self-healing, you encountered network spinal, which is a particular approach to chiropractic healing work. And so you basically had radically transformative experiences. And when you say on the table, just so people understand, you're talking about being on a massage table or a body work
chiropractic table.
Chiropractic table, right?
Yeah.
So on a chiropractic table. So on the table, receiving this body work, and then later entrainment that we'll get to, you had these essentially, very unfamiliar and very radical experiences of healing and release and catharsis, right? Not just like ecstatically laughing, but also the accumulated or suppressed like layers of anger and things like this. I'm hearing maybe sorrow, I don't know, coming up and out, being present, then released. So and then the learning and the integration happening on some subtle level is what I'm imagining. So it's beautiful that you had to undergo your own self-healing journey to get to the point of then becoming a chiropractor, a doctor of chiropractic yourself.
Totally. And still am.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it really is an ever going, ever evolving process, because what it seems that we're actually doing is evolving the nervous system, essentially. Um,
So
yeah.
let's get into what that means in a minute. But why don't we just start, for people who are listening, maybe familiar with chiropractic practice, or at least somewhat, maybe have had good experiences or no experiences, whatever it might be, that baggage or lack thereof, lack of knowledge about what it is. Why don't we start by just like unpacking what is chiropractic, defining this for people so that we can kind of get a basic understanding of what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Chiropractors there's a misconception out there, I have found, that chiropractors are bone and joint docs, and that you really don't need to see a chiropractor until you're in pain of some sort. And where that holds its place, because we do work with the bones and we do work with the joints and we do help alleviate pain. There are the first thing chiropractors are doctors of the nervous system. And there are a plethora of various techniques within chiropractic. So I was lucky enough to go to one of 3 schools in the whole country, and I would say of 4 in the whole world that teach the most amount the most amount of techniques.
The widest
And
range, yeah.
the widest range of techniques, yes. And unfortunately, also, there's only about 3 schools in the country that still focus heavily on the philosophy of chiropractic, which is very much linked to Eastern philosophy and yoga. And also one of the things with the primary number one philosophy within chiropractic is the power that made the body heals the body. So it's one thing to be kind of like a pain-based model approach. It's another thing to really address the underlying root cause of the nervous system and why the nervous system is actually causing the bones and the fascia to distort or come out of place a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's actually a deep topic right there that we've spoken about a little, and I want to make sure we really unpack for the audience because this is really beautiful. And I think, part of the point of this podcast is to share both personal and collective tools for transformation. And it's always intersecting, but on a personal level, understanding how to recover and optimize our well-being on every level of our own being is huge. It's crucial first step. And I think that what you're describing is an incredible starting point, a really important foundation to lay as like step one in understanding. And apparently for chiropractic and on some level, I think for just our overall knowledge of ourselves and how we work as people. So I want to unpack this a little bit, make sure we're getting it. You're saying we all go around thinking chiropractic doctors are there to take care of our bones and joints. And in reality, you're telling us that as a doctor of chiropractic yourself, that actually chiropractic healing is all about the nervous system, that chiropractors are doctors of the nervous system, not bone and joint doctors, and that this has to do with getting to the deeper underlying cause of our conditions rather than just the surface level symptoms. And you're saying that like the state of our nervous system, which I want to ask you some questions about, but you're saying that how our nervous system is doing is actually directing and determining, for example, how our bodies are directing themselves and how our muscles and then bones and joints and skeletal system is kind of like pulled on to come out of alignment in the first place. And so if I have a postural issue or a back pain or whatever other thing that's going on, it's very often not starting from the skeletal level. It's just resulting in a skeletal issue, but it's actually starting from sort of like an imprint or a code that's stuck in the nervous system. Am I getting that?
Yes.
So let's unpack that a little further. Like, how do we get those stucknesses that you as chiropractors are helping us unstick ourselves from, the decode those programs?
How do we accumulate or acquire them?
Yeah. What is that coming from? Like, why Why
It's
does it
coming
important to peel back to the first layer of the nervous system where that's happening? What's happening there? Yeah.
it's coming from, at the most base level, a lack of safety. Now, what causes a lack of safety or a perception of not being safe um, is are various things. But in chiropractic philosophy, what they teach us are the three T's: thoughts, toxins, and traumas. And those are also referred to as stressors that essentially stress our nervous system out to the point that it has no more room to take anything else in. And so what the more and more it tries to take in and it doesn't have capacity for, meaning that the sympathetic and parasympathetic, or the autonomic nervous system, isn't functioning at like optimal health, or it doesn't have enough bandwidth, that it can't take anything else in. And when it does try to do that, it either creates a contraction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, what I'm hearing is whether it's factors in our environment or factors in our internal environment, like our thought patterns, um, there's something that causes us to contract as a sort of defense mechanism. So in the case of a trauma, like I fell out of a tree last year, it'd probably be very beneficial for me to receive some body work and energy work from you, because it was affected my spine specifically. But it's like the crack of I landed on the ground, hurt my spine. Now, it's not just that there's a physical crack, it's that the trauma of the impact of that has this like ripple through the mind and body. And that whole ripple is kind of like carried by and stored in the autonomic nervous system, which has like its sympathetic and parasympathetic states. But so the nervous system itself is like the central channel and library. It's like the where these contractions occur and are stored, right? That's what I'm hearing. And so
Yeah, you can think of it exactly as library or channel, and also like software. I think
yeah.
of it like software, kind of, that it's taking in information and learning from it and storing it so that we may adapt to our environment better.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So the learning is allowing us to be able to withstand the stressors of our environment without getting stressed in our nervous system. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
So adaptation, which may be even related to what you meant by nervous system evolution, is like, can we become more and more relaxed, even in the face of more and more energetic intensity, let's say?
Exactly. How
Yeah.
much can we be with? How
Mm-hmm.
much can we be with and be aware of, and not necessarily hold, sometimes hold, but or like in one way hold, but also just be a part of, be aware of, um without losing our center,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
almost.
Yeah, yeah. And last time we were talking about this, we were talking about like your state of presence when you're driving, for example. Let's say, I might have gotten in a little fender bender, or even it just has to do with my daily stressors. Maybe it's even things from childhood or epigenetic, past lives, whatever. But I've got these like tensions that I'm holding, so I'm like hunched over the wheel and I'm stressed out driving. That's not as ideal way to approach that activity or any situation as like, what if I drop my shoulders? What if I'm relaxed? And then I'm become more adaptable when I'm present with my surroundings like that. And I think what this brings up for me is, as a Tai Chi teacher, it just gives me this image of like supple. Like, what does it look like when we're just really
So
supple
sorry.
rather
Mm-hmm.
than
Yes.
rigid?
Yes.
Um, and so like rigidity can be dangerous, right? It's like if you fall and
Exactly.
you tense up, you're
I was
likelier to
just
get
going
hurt.
there.
Yeah. Okay. I don't mean it. I don't mean it to steal
No,
the,
it's
yeah, yeah,
perfect. It's
yeah.
perfect. It's perfect.
But like
We
children,
just
right? It's like, yeah, we're just children. They can like throw themselves around and they're just so flexible and relaxed and adaptive that like they might take a tumble and not get hurt because ultimately, their bodies aren't rigid and tensing up for impact. And yeah.
that's exactly right. And we can think about that in the psyche too, in the
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
mind. And are we strict and rigid with our thinking?
mm-hmm,
How highly identified, attached, or clung onto are we to our thoughts?
mm-hmm.
To Yeah, and then actually, how does that show up in the body, and vice versa? So yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So and in general, this whole conversation is revealing just how deep the mind body connection in health and wellness and medicine really runs, because what we're saying is that ultimately, if you unpack even from a skeletal chiropractic perspective, um, the real origin of our well-being or lack thereof, our dis-ease, right? um, if we unpack that, then at the core is of disease would be disease. And again, this might be something that you've mentioned that you might get into more, but um, yeah, so it's just revealing that there's this place where psyche and soma meet, and that's where their overall health in either case starts and is based,
Mm-hmm.
right at the meeting point of psyche and soma.
Mm-hmm.
Both our mental health and our physical health is born and determined and directed, right? And that's where we need to go to understand it.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All cells hold memory,
Mm-hmm.
and the nervous system is the medium by which we take in, process, and adapt to our environment.
Mm-hmm.
And the more spaciousness we and balance between tonicity and laxity and the nervous system and also the body, the more adaptable we are to our environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to greater overall health and well-being, better relationships, connection, in my experience, to God source, to all that is, to myself, to my intuition, to all of my centers, as all of these modalities work to kind of wring out those centers, if you will, kind of wring them out so that then we create more space and we learn from that information, that stored information, that unprocessed stored information. We actually learn and integrate that information, and then we create more space in the nervous system to actually then take on more. It's like, okay, now not only can I be aware of and dance with all of this other stuff, but now I can like acquire more, and I think that's part of the feminine too in me. I'm just like, oh, there's always like more creation and more expansion and more like possibility for um I don't know, expression almost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting too, like this is the, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's
Yeah.
great.
It's interesting because this is the second time you're bringing up masculine and feminine. The first time being that, when a healer you encountered and later studied with brought up how your spinal posture unconsciously seemed to convey to them something related to your personal history in relation to the masculine. What this brings up, the reason I'm mentioning it is because it's showing us that not only are like our thoughts dictating or affecting, let's say, influencing things like our physical health based on our posture, based on how our nervous system is causing us to move and position ourselves in our muscles and our skeleton. It's like peeling back those layers, but not only is there this layer of psychology and mind there's also maybe even underneath that or flowing through that these like patterns of energy, which in Jungian psychology we'd probably call psychic energy, meaning energy of the psyche, of the soul. So it's like basically archetypal movement and patterns of energy, whether masculine, feminine, etc., that are also informing, like they're percolating through our thought patterns, which percolates into the way that our software, metaphorically speaking, of our nervous system is programmed, which percolates into how we're responding to our environment and adapting to our environment. And it's that relating between ourselves and our surroundings that, is at the heart of, like you said, relationship and also our health, our wellness, like whether we're contracting or we're opening up, we're closing down to protect ourselves or we're opening up to connect.
Exactly.
Which is also like a core theme in this podcast in general that we want to be emphasizing, is the importance of opening up to reconnect where we've shut down and disconnected, because that's, also I think what most people in our society are noticing that we're all suffering from is disconnection from ourselves, from each other, from nature, from the totality. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why I'm so passionate, partially or mostly, about embodiment work and somatopsychic um, practices, is that I genuinely feel and believe, because I know that this has happened within myself. Like, as I've practiced this kind of opening and contraction that leads to more connection with my own being, um, I've become more peaceful within myself. And so one of my like mantras, and also just life prayers, living prayers, living, breathing prayer of my life dedication to this, is because I genuinely feel that as we heal the wars within, we will heal the wars without. It's inevitable because we're so connected. And so, like, I've always felt, and I'm sure a lot of us have, I'm just like, why do we, like, it's not enough for me to be like, oh, there's always been colonization. Like, yeah, duh, I know, doesn't mean it's right. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why have we actually continued with the war? And I have not honestly felt from this planet, because I don't understand it on that level. You know what I mean? Like, I really don't. It's not that I don't understand it. It's that once you understand it, you do better, it feels like.
Yeah, you're
And
saying, go ahead.
yeah, so I just feel, and yeah, so that goes back to the dis-ease, right? So
Mm-hmm.
people are dis-easeful in their mind and their body because they have these accumulated stressors or energetic imprints, call them small to big traumas, that, everything that causes this. um they have those just built up way too much over time, and so then that causes, yeah, just more and more disconnect, like you're saying, from yourself. And then we feel disconnected from our environment and each other. And so of course it's easy to create war, because you're not me and I'm not you. We're not actually connected. So if we're separate, then it's you against me and me against you, right? So survival of the fittest type thing. And I understand that inherently within nature, but something in me remembers a place where it was not like this and doesn't have to be like this. And so that really, if you want to know, like, keeps waking me up to be alive in this world, it's that, is to hopefully spread a message of peace and
Yeah.
love, through these practices, honestly.
So you're pointing out, and this is central to, our all of our work too. The mirror image that's caused by our lack of relaxation and our core dis-ease as people, which is our state of affairs in the world. And when there's conflict and separation in our global society and state of affairs, it's very clear that that's just directly stemming from our sense of disconnection inside as people. And yeah, that's a very important kind of central theme to all of this, is that when we do release the layers of tension and resistance in our own nervous systems and become more peaceful as people, inevitably that's the way to a more peaceful world, because it's clear that the cause of conflict and the sort of issues in our world, ongoing issues and conflicts, is coming from that internal conflict. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. I do want to bring the conversation back to the bodywork modalities that you use to help people, um, including yourself, release layers of tension, deprogram the nervous system from its contractions so that our whole physical, mental, emotional, spiritual bodies can just relax and integrate, and so that we can withstand more stressors and get less stressed, all of that. So what you also have worked for a long time with Rolfing as a Rolfer. So for people who are less familiar with Rolfing, why don't we go ahead and unpack that, define what Rolfing is all about and how it works, what it means.
Yeah, so Rolfing structural integration, they were the first, was founded by Dr. Ida Rolf, first of all. And she was one of the first women in the 1920s to actually receive her PhD in this country. And she developed this body of work after studying with chiropractors and osteopaths for years prior to this, of her development of this. She was also really influenced by yoga. She eventually would Rolf people in yoga asana. And um, so what she figured out was, or what she worked with, the modality, is working with the fascia. And there are many layers of fascia that start just below the skin layer and go all the way down to the bone layer. It's considered to be the connective tissue of the body because it literally connects our bones to our muscles to our skin, and also our muscles to every other muscle. It's also all around, in and around the joints, of course, and also it is all in and around our spinal cord too, that houses our brain cord or our central nervous system. And the fascia, there's a thickening of it around each muscle called the myofascia. So the myo meaning muscle. And what happens is, from our brain cord or our central nervous system, the nerves branch out of the spinal foramina, of the holes of the actual spinal column, and they branch out and embed themselves in and around all the layers of the fascia, all the organs, all the way down to our limbs. It's literally what allows us to have limbs and move. So without the fascia and the nerves embedded within, we would literally be a bag of bones and like a brain cord. So like think of like a fish almost. And there are theories out there that, claim that we actually come from the ocean anyway, but it is interesting to think about. And basically what happens is the layers of fascia like to glide on one another. And the reason they stop gliding, or they kind of get stuck with quote unquote adhesions, is through various things. But basically, one of which being the nerves that are embedded within those layers, they just start to overfire. And they overfire because of the same thing that causes dis-ease in the rest of the nervous system, which are thoughts, toxins, and traumas. So what we do as Rolfers is we're taught to see the body as a whole. And there's also like spiraling planes of this fascia that go from the bottom of the foot contralaterally or across the body in a spiral-like motion from each side. Sorry, I'm doing this like that. And so we're taught to like see bodies in motion. Like, well, I'll always watch somebody walk before each session, and then I'll do some range of motion stuff with them as well, depending on what we're working on that day. And I'll have them do that after the session as well, so that their brain actually can they have a reference point, and I'll have them name what they're feeling, because when you name it, you can actually hold on to the information better. So I want them to have a reference point between being in my office and the before feeling, and then also the after feeling, so that they can find the after feeling outside of my office in their everyday life more effortlessly on their own. But what we do in an actual session of Rolfing is, so Rolfing structural integration is traditionally 10 sessions designed to systematically open up the body through the fascial planes and the nervous system. And Dr. Ida Rolf figured out that you have to open up certain parts of the body first before other parts will open up. Also, through the series, we're working through the layers of fascia. So the first 3 layers, we're working in the superficial fascia, kind of globally, right? Over 3 sessions. Because you really have to open up the superficial ones first before you can access the deeper ones. You still do affect the deeper ones while you're accessing the superficial ones through the subcutaneous nerves that interconnect them. But to get really into the deeper layers, you got to open up the superficial ones first. Sessions 4 through 7 are what we call the core sessions, and we move into the deeper layer, the deep layer of fascia that is the deeper ones, but it also connects down to the bone, actually. So we're not always like fully accessing the bone, but when we can access the bone, we do also work like very intricately around the bones and the joints. So then 8, 9, and 10 are what we call full integration sessions. And there's so much to go into with Rolfing. There's a whole other certification called Rolf Movement, which we did learn some of in the basic training, which is what I did. But there's like continuing education for days. But there's only 2 schools in the whole world, actually. One in the founding one in Boulder, and then one in Brazil. But there's all kinds of stuff to do within a session to interrupt the original signal that comes from the amygdala and interrupt it so it chooses a new neural pathway. And when it chooses a new neural pathway, the brain-body connection learns a new way to be or to move, both. And basically, yeah, so we work with the nervous system and the fascia to unwind these things. And people, that have a lot of issues, the goal is to help people find what Dr. Ida Rolf called your line. So your line with a capital L. So it's almost like your own gravitational line, essentially. And, literally all of us, like just from one, our society being just so much of a forward thinking society at large, it's always go, 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 do, produce a lot in the future. We're just naturally inclined to have a little bit of a forward head carriage, let alone talk about typing and driving and, all the, again, like the psychosomatic stuff that happens with traumas or stressors or grief. We go inward, or, in network spinal, when the lower cervicals get involved, you're really angry about something. When the upper cervical is involved, it's more trust and time and relationships and stuff. And when the pelvis is involved, it's has a lot to do with identity and how you've had to shift your authentic nature, your authentic self to fit into a certain culture, whether that is like your work environment, your friends, your family, an actual different culture than yours. And then we also that's more in a network spinal. But Rolfing, there's a lot of overlap actually. And I've been in lectures of Dr. Donnie Epstein, who's the founder of Network Spinal, and he's mentioned how Dr. Ida Rolf, the founder of Rolfing Structural Integration, would always talk about the attitudes of the body. So the attitudes of the body are how the psyche is showing up in the body. Mm-hmm. So again, it's like a very basic one people can resonate with very easily, or pretty easily, is when we feel grief, when we feel we collapse our lungs in, we collapse our heart in, right, for protection. And I think it's also interesting that the lungs in Chinese medicine are all about grief as well. Mm-hmm. But so that's kind of what we do. And there's a lot of overlap between Rolfing, structural integration, and network spinal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I imagine that there's also like a unique flavor that's created when you yourself are sort of intuitively integrating the modalities that you're trained in into your own healing practice with clients, which you're welcome to speak to. I want to make sure that we also just get kind of a full recap first of all the different components. So network spinal is a particular approach to chiropractic. And is there a word for chiropractic? Like that, is it chiropractic healing, chiropractic practice, or is it just chiropractic?
You can say chiropractic care.
Chiropractic care.
Yeah, it's like a practice.
Yeah.
Chiropractic
practice.
Well, it's interesting because really what they teach us and what we're tested on is chiropractic is an art, philosophy, and a science. Uh-huh. That's the philosophy of chiropractic, which it is. It's a science, it's a philosophy, and when you start to practice, you develop your own art through it. Because again, you're saying, your unique flavor, each practitioner's unique flavor kind of comes out.
Yeah. And I love that. I love hearing, the different layers, like you're talking to us about our anatomy, about the structures of our bodies, but then there's also the more subtle insights regarding how that also correlates to our psychology, how they're informing each other, which is clearly a root component of these, let's say, healing art forms, because they're all healing arts, and you as the healer, as a practitioner, are also practicing your art with your clients, it's beautiful. I think these are things we've lost touch with in some of the more dominant models of healthcare. And I think that including the science, but then becoming familiar enough with the healing work itself to make an art out of it is key. And go ahead.
It just reminds me that a lot of the art that emerges, for me at least, and I think a lot of people, is how well can you listen to what the moment and it is calling for with a certain system. How much can you, because each system is different. And so it's like, for me, it's like, how can I best be of service to this person's nervous system in a sustainable way in this session, or in this moment, in this very moment. It's so much for me about attuning to the moment and being a channel through which we collaborate and kind of meet this energy together, and then allow it to kind of dissipate, integrate, move through the system.
Well, and speaking about lack of safety or feeling safe, I think that that's what we all want and need whether we realize it or not.
Presence.
Right. Yeah. Especially
Mm-hmm.
when someone's taking care of us to like heal something that may feel vulnerable, whether physically or mentally. It's like, are you present with me in this moment? Because
Right.
I think that's what they mean by holding space, right? When like you're facilitating somebody's healing. And I think we'll get more into this, but you talked about them getting to their after feeling, like the feeling they have after a session with you on their own, right? So they're learning, they're teaching their own, you're helping familiarize their own nervous system with how to get into that more certainly. I think stress resistant would be a very ironic word to use here, so let's say adaptable state, right? But um, when you're helping people get into that, it's like, how do we learn to feel safe with someone else's support? They like, we need them to be present with us, with like what's really happening for us in this moment. And it sounds,
Exactly.
I felt that from you when you were like, let's meet this together, this energy that's up right now. It's like, well, that, I think that we relax into that. We feel supported when we know there's someone there with us meeting what's real for us now.
Yep.
We're not being dropped, and I think
Yep.
I've had experiences, won't name names, but in some doctors' offices that are amazing as a kid, actually, and then experiences in some doctors' offices as a kid where it's like they didn't look at you once. It's like, that's
Right.
not, and they might have been a famous doctor, but that's not really how you heal a human being. You don't
Right.
ignore them. You need to be
Right.
present with them and
Right.
present to what is up for them in that moment. So I think that's what facilitating and holding a healing space, a space for someone's healing, is all about. And it
100%.
sounds like you do that just naturally and intuitively, and also through your training. And um, it's good
I
that
do my
there's
best.
yeah, it's good that there's people like yourself out there helping serve the healing needs of people. So the fascia sounds to me, it's almost like the intelligence of like a mycelial network. Like there's this um, ocean of information flowing through our bodies, carried through the fascia in the nerves, and then that's kind of like what brings us to life and animates us. And it's stemming from the central nervous system, which goes from the brain down the spinal column, right? And so this like uh, network of information is being carried and moving us. And why don't you illustrate for us what does it actually look like and feel like, and what are you actually doing with the body when you're practicing body work, influenced by network spinal chiropractic care as well as Rolfing, which are clearly connected. So when you're doing Rolfing and chiropractic work for a client, like, what are you doing with the body in relation to these tensions and contractions that we accumulate in our nervous system, and how are
Hmm.
you helping us on the table release that or
Hmm.
or integrate? Mm-hmm.
Well, both techniques work with deepening awareness, breath, and movement in the body and connecting the mind with the body. And in Rolfing structural integration, we sink in to the layer of availability, the layer of availability. And we're constantly kind of working 3D as much as we can. Um, and we shear the fascia because remember the fascia likes to shear. We shear the fascia and we'll either kind of work indirectly, which is to take the pattern like more into safety. So for example, if you're used to having your shoulder in like this, even just the slightest bit, um, that is your normal, right? And so that feels safe to you, to your nervous system, is to do that. And so sometimes what we'll do is we'll work what they call indirectly, which is kind of, it sounds backwards at first, but indirectly is to work to guide it into the pattern more. And then directly would be to challenge the pattern. And it kind of it just depends on the person and depends on the moment, literally the session, literally the area of the body within the session. And Um, on average, we hold it there for 30 seconds to 2 minutes, because that's on average what it takes the nervous system to respond or to downregulate in some manner. And downregulation of the nervous system can look like a yawn, a breath, a twitch, a fluttering of the eyes, getting hot, getting cold. All of these things are the nervous system changing. And in some ways, sometimes it can upregulate at first and then to downregulate. Because remember, we're meeting these like this energy in us that has been stored, and whatever that energy is, right? So it could be an intense energy, a trauma, a habitual pattern of thinking, of, you know, of shame, of guilt, of ecstasy. I mean, the range is literally, it's from,
Full
it's
spectrum.
it's the entire spectrum of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so we just hold space for that to happen, essentially, until that happens. And oftentimes I also, if people,
That being
I,
the regulation, the down regulation, the signs that they're down regulating the nervous
yes,
system trigger.
um yes, this the downregulation, and really just holding space for them in their body and in their awareness of
I lost
me
Emmy.
being like, I got you, I am holding you, you no longer have to hold yourself.
You haven't used the word presencing yet, but you were saying that whether directly or indirectly.
Yeah, so we help them downregulate the nervous system by holding and bringing their presence, essentially, through breath, movement, awareness, like bringing their awareness and their presence and their breath into the area that we're working. It's like clockwork. I can just kind of tell when the person's nervous system like down regulates, because I'll be able to sink, usually there'll be a big breath, and I'll be able to sink deeper into the fascia, and there's a release. And so yeah, it's really through, I kind of like saying like I'm shining a light on, I'm just like kind of showing them where it is, and then I'm holding space for them to come deeper into their nervous system by breath, movement, awareness of whatever is showing up for them by touching that area, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like you're weaving both the psycho and the somatic healing process together uh, so in the way I've heard you refer to it is that you're presencing the pattern that's there. So let's say there was some sort of habitual way of thinking about themselves, like you said, some shame, or some traumatizing or toxic influences in the environment, like you know uh, I'm making light here for some reason. My brain gets goofy and it pictured like someone popping out like a ghost and going boo. But anyways, life does a little bit of that, and then we get tense, um, and and so what I'm hearing is when we get tense, we have some sort of pattern of holding that we've become accustomed to. And what you're doing with the body work is you're literally just finding those patterns of holding. So you might notice the way a person walks, the way a person carries themselves, their posture, their body's attitude. And you see these attitudinal adjustments that are needed, starting from even the unconscious physical tendencies that have
Mm-hmm.
kind of encoded themselves through the nervous system, and the fascia from there into their bodies. And you're finding that, and you're bringing it to the surface of conscious awareness by presencing it, by touching it and moving either with or against. And so you're either indirectly confronting the pattern, the accumulated pattern, by presencing it by moving with the way that they've contracted in some sort of self-defensive mechanism at some, through some experience or pattern of feeling unsafe, there's this contraction, you hold that, and then you just let that be. And being with it is kind of helping them learn how to, through their awareness, through their breath, through their movement, remember another refreshed way of being instead of that.
Yeah. And remember that they're safe.
Mm-hmm,
at the most
mm-hmm,
basic level, that's what the nervous system wants, is safety.
mm-hmm.
Safety, and it wants to live, it wants to survive, right? So creating more safety through presence of what it means to be embodied, to feel the body, to be with the body, to express the body, to all the things,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's what I love about all these practices, is it offers that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's also like a remembering that we're safe to be in our bodies. You might have just said that, but that's coming through. So that it's okay to feel a certain way. And it seems like this is also the learning, the kind of evolutionary process of the nervous system, the learning to adapt to circumstance is like, we're learning that even if it's smart at some moment to contract to protect ourselves, actually opening up and relaxing is then also going to be a source of greater safety for us, and we don't have to stay there in that contraction. And that's
totally.
and
But
that's like, yeah.
I was just going to say, and the way is through.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So like, no, we don't have to stay there, but we get, it's such a paradox, because the way we get out of it, if you will, or to
Mm-hmm.
create more space and safety, is to be with it, just what you're saying. And
Mm-hmm.
as human beings, we're taught to avoid pain and suffering. And that's something I say with all of this. It's a whole lot of being with it. How much can we actually be with?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that the 360 encourages that on so many different levels, through a different lens and through a different practice. I
Mm-hmm.
love that Network Spinal also does the same thing, the exact same thing.
Yeah, and let's get into 360 and the connection between those two next. But just to make sure we're kind of crossing our T's and dotting our I's here on understanding this integrative healing work that you do with chiropractic and Rolfing. What you're calling the layer of availability, it sounds like, and also why you're saying that the way out is through. So it's kind of like you're looking at the person's pattern and you're not just trying to counter it. You could go against the pattern, if that's what's available. And that's what I think you mean by layer of availability. It's like, if that's available for the person, you could confront it directly, and that might help them unlearn what's stuck there. But if that's not available, simply going with the pattern already brings it up to awareness, to presence, which is what gives them the option to consider and choose to like release that, right? So it's very interesting. And then you're saying that releasing, maybe not even the right word, because I'm hearing you basically describe it as down regulating. So it's like, through your support, the person's nervous system is learning to regulate itself. And through the repeated sessions, it gets better and better at its own self-regulation process. So we think of a body worker or chiropractor as a bone and joint doctor, but actually what they are is either a nervous system co-regulator, or if anything, just like, cheering on and reminding you of your capacity to regulate your nervous system.
Yes. And I also I'd like to differentiate between nervous system healing and nervous system regulation, because Really, nervous system healing is what I also would say chiropractors do, and all of this really, but specifically chiropractic, is that we found that the bandwidth within the nervous system actually increases because there's so many practices that you can regulate your nervous system at this level, and you can do a lot of regulation at this level through yoga, through breath work, through all kinds of stuff, right? But when the nervous system actually begins to heal, it increases its bandwidth to take in even more information, if that makes sense. So, um, but yeah, totally. I mean,
The
we,
healing is the increase of bandwidth,
yeah,
and the regulation is essentially being able to have a bandwidth and using that bandwidth. No?
essentially, yeah. I mean, um, yeah, you could think of it like that for sure.
Yeah, I just making. I'm not sure if I missed something there, but I think I got it. So,
I don't think you missed anything. It's just it's like regulation, yes, happens within the nervous system, but there's certain things that increase the so everything that I do, I ask everything affects the nervous system, right?
mm-hmm,
My question always is to what degree?
mm-hmm,
To what degree are we affecting the nervous system? And I think that what I'm trying to say is that it's not that those other practices don't actually heal the nervous system as well on some level, on a big level, right? I've just found that within chiropractic care, and the research shows that that healing and that bandwidth increases at an exponential rate, especially with network spinal, I would say. Um,
so I
that
think, yeah.
yeah,
So I think actually I get it a little better now that the bandwidth, it's what it's reminding me of is how an athlete has a very different relationship to going into an athletic heart rate than someone that, let's say, maybe a little out of shape. It's like
yeah,
if I'm out of shape, just a little bit of exercise will already get me into my athletic heart rate. But it's also not as powerful of an athletic heart rate when I'm there. And as opposed to an athlete, when they're resting, they're really resting. And then it takes more to get them into an athletic heart rate. But once they're there, it's a very big jump and a very big difference. And so I think that's kind of what I'm seeing as like bandwidth. It's like how adaptive is your nervous system? What,
yes,
yeah, and how accustomed are you to self-regulating?
exactly.
Um, yeah, and then when you might be confronted by a more dramatic situation, are you able to, like an athlete, deal with that in the moment attentively, and also as a result of your bandwidth and capacity, be a little bit more immune to how that might affect you afterwards because you return to a more deeply relaxed state once you've dealt with the emergency and so on.
Yep.
So
It's
that,
like
yeah,
how quickly can you get back on the horse?
it's
You know?
fascinating. It's like the psychological and autonomic version of athletic heart rate. It's a very, very interesting topic. Yeah, so let's kind of dive into the 360 emergence here, which is dance related and movement related. And I think this is also a great segue from co-regulating with a healer that's doing body work on you and helping you with your breath awareness and movement to doing that for ourselves with our practices. Like, I know you were a yoga teacher, and here this is a dance practice. So why don't you share all about 360 emergence, what it is, how it works, and just unpack this next modality for us that you work with.
Absolutely, would love to. Um, the 360 emergence is a love of mine. I have been in a year-long apprenticeship program to become a facilitator of the 360 emergence. And it's an embodiment practice that is rooted in 5 rhythms dance and ecstatic dance. Um, and basically what it is it's a mapping, or it has a map and it has a lexicon to help cue individuals while we're in the practice of dance in order to get into a trance state. We're cueing the individuals to help them get further into their somatic experience. And so the 5 rhythms was founded by Gabrielle Roth, and she figured out that there are 5 primary rhythms that move through the human body, or that humans move with or to. And my 2 primary teachers, what they would do is they would find music that encapsulated each rhythm, and sometimes it would be a blend of the rhythms, but they would give you an opportunity to practice for a whole song's worth, which is kind of a lot sometimes because it's confrontational, can push your edge. And I found this practice also in Boulder before I found the 360. But the 5 rhythms, it gives you like an ample amount of time to practice each one of these rhythms during a session, during a dance of like an hour and a half to 2 hours. And you're going through these rhythms. And what I found when I was dancing that dance in Boulder was that like I said, I was trained as a trained dancer, like all growing up. And I was already ecstatically dancing. But what I found in actually creating a little bit more of structure through the actual practice of the rhythm is it was unlocking movements in me that I didn't know I could do. Not just movements, but connectivity, because to move a certain way, you have to be connected to yourself and to your surroundings, and in a very intricate and deep way. And if anybody's ever danced with me, they know that I like to move. But yeah, so practicing, giving it a little bit more structure actually allotted for me to discover even more flow, right, within my own dance. And through that, it emerged, like my own rhythm, if you will, or dance emerged out of me, like more than I thought was possible, right? And of course, there's ecstasy. Of course, like when we move to music and like bring the mind body connection again. So when we do that, again, we're connecting deeper with our nervous system, and we're connecting deeper with our soma and all of the energy and emotions that have been stored within it. And so things get stirred up during the dance too, and they get moved, they ask you to be with it, they ask you to be witnessed in it, they ask you to witness others, right? And for me, it they always say, like, my teachers, we talk about this all the time, but it's like one of the primary things is we dance to become free, really. And we dance as a prayer, and we dance to remember our inherent connectivity, to remember our inherent unity, to remember our inherent freedom even. But yeah, to become most liberated, in my experience. That's why I dance, and it's a common thing amongst this community, is the same thing that I hear often. And my 2 primary teachers, Kate Shela and Amber Ryan, they studied directly under Gabrielle Roth for like 20 years, or over 20 years around then. And so um, when Gabrielle passed, they broke off and started their own thing called the 360 Emergence. And it's different. And then we're not doing this rhythm, then this rhythm, then this rhythm, then this rhythm, or a combination of that, which I like. I will always love the fibrillums to do that as well. But the 360 is just a little bit different in that they created a different map, and it's a little bit more of a broad spectrum, and it can they, for example, we talk a lot about in the 360 compass, we talk a lot about the 8 directions. This is one of the pillars of the 360, of the 8 directions, and it's within, without, before, behind, beside, above, and below. And so as we dance, they tune us in to how to move with, through, and from these 8 directions, right? And they also, they'll invite us to move around the room if we get stuck in one little area of the room, right? Or they'll invite us to do, if they see the room is starting to get a little stagnant in one way, shape, or form, they help us become unstagnant, if you will. And there's so many other things I could go into with the 360 compass and what we work with. Another amazing thing that I love is we work with the golden thread, and it reminds me of the Sushumna Nadi. They also say the Sushumna Nadi or the central channel in various traditions. And in network spinal, I relate it to that, to the network wave that is, and also a little bit of the kundalini, right? That's rising up and down. It's like this central channel concept of energy moving up and down and getting stuck, and then us utilizing various breath awareness and movement to connect with it, to be able to move it through the system and integrate that information that the nervous system wants to learn from in order to adapt to its environment better, if that makes sense. So it's like if something comes in and you're like, I just use a very, do you want to say something?
No. Please keep going. I just, when you
I
said, if that makes sense, you're saying like that you're moving the information through the central nervous system by processing it through the central channel. It's like the energy itself, and I think that's what we can get into here is energy, vibration, sound. And in a minute, but I don't want to throw
totally.
you off. Just keep
Oh no,
going. So, yeah.
that's really it. But it's like, yeah, we move it through the system in order to liberate it, right? And that's literally what all of these practices are doing.
Well, that's the opposite of being stuck, right? It's like when
Yeah,
something's stuck, when something's tense,
or
it's not
contracted or
moving. It's
whatever, right?
yeah. We're talking about flow, movement, allow. That's the liberation, is the release of the stuckness, the contraction, whether it's a thought pattern or a physical contraction. Let it keep moving through, keep flowing instead of getting stuck and stagnant and blocked and so on.
And
Yeah.
one more thing I just love to touch on within all of these practices is it invites us to be witnessed in all of our rawness, all of our emotion. And I just find that has been such a huge component in my own healing, and I see it like help others all the time as well.
So this is beautiful. It's amazing. This practice sounds epic, and I'm excited to experience it at the retreat that we're offering this summer. We're going to have a lot of fun. There'll be a whole somatic healing and psychosomatic practices component, but then with the embodied movement component of the weekend retreat we're offering in August on the land here, and maybe some other events around Colorado, we'll also get into the dance and the music. And so I want to explore that a little more. But before we leave 360, so I'm hearing, this connection to the rhythms, to the movement of energy through our central energy system. And this is, I think, the bridge to the deeper topics we're starting to touch upon, is that we've been talking a lot about the nervous system. We've been talking about the body and the mind-body connection. But ultimately, all of this is related to energy. And ultimately, all of this is related to, literally the nervous system itself transmitting energetic signals. And all of this is related to frequency. Before we get too much into that, I just want to ask a couple of things about 360 Emergence itself, and then we'll start to just like really weave that towards these deeper topics and back to network spinal. And that's, you told me that yoga nidra is a part of the practice. So if maybe you want to touch upon that briefly, the yoga nidra component,
Mm-hmm.
and we can define it for people if people aren't familiar. But yeah, just
Yeah.
how that plays in.
So yoga nidra another way to think about yoga nidra is conscious sleep. It is the practice of conscious sleep. And it's really falling back between, like, it's like the in between space between wakefulness and unconscious sleep. And I would, I would, I would hate to say, like, or not hate to say, but I guess maybe not unconscious sleep, because I think in my mind, consciousness exists whether we're aware of it or not, kind
Mm-hmm,
of.
mm-hmm,
Because there's layers of consciousness that we can become ever more aware of, just even from a child to an adult, right?
mm-hmm,
And vice versa. There's things that we can forget from childhood. There's all kinds of stuff. So I think it exists whether we are aware of it or not. But it is that space, it's that liminal space in between like wakefulness and sleep.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And yeah, we just practice it, and it's been a huge transformative experience for me. Um, they've shown that the nervous system actually heals more in this state than it does when you're totally asleep.
Mm-hmm.
It takes like a very short amount of yoga nidra practice, like a few hours, compared to like 8 or 9 hours of sleep,
Mm-hmm.
to do the same level of healing to your nervous system that 8 or 9 hours of sleep would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's certainly a deep topic, maybe deeper than we can get into today. But I think for the listeners, if they might be familiar with kind of our core curriculum that we'll be going more into in my solo episodes on the podcast, there's some correlation here because there's this kind of paradoxical relationship that we're talking about in some ways between the sympathetic or like ever more deeply relaxed and parasympathetic or ever more alert nervous system, autonomic functions of the nervous system. And so in a ever more deeply relaxed state, we tend to, on the shadow side, think of depressive states, or in an unconscious sense, think of deep sleep and various layers of sleep. And then on the other side, we tend to think of alertness, or even in the shadow sense, let's say anxiety. But if it's not anxious, it's at least like excited and active. But in Yoga Nidra, there's this deep sense of conscious awareness, except it's being woven into a very, very deep state of relaxation and rest. And so there's like a bridging of the opposite worlds there.
Mm-hmm.
And what you say about consciousness is very interesting. I think that we'll touch upon that a little bit, maybe in the retreat and before the end of the episode. But ultimately, you're saying it's like there's deeper levels of our consciousness than what we're normally used to accessing with our day-to-day awareness, and that
Yeah.
we are actually getting more in touch with those deeper parts of ourselves by consciously relaxing in Yoga Nidra, which apparently is a part of the 360 emergence
Mm-hmm.
practice.
Yes, I would say so.
Very interesting. And then you've said that to me that basically five rhythms and the influences in 360 emergence have some influences from various shamanic or shamanistic practices. The word shamanism actually is closely related to the first language I spoke when I was growing up by a few months, which was Russian. So shaman, we would say.
Wow.
And that's what it would be called in Siberia. There's Mircea Eliade suggests that it might actually stem from, I think it would be Stramana, but that's like actually a word from that could have come up through Mongolia from uh, eastern parts of Asia where, like a Buddhist monk would be considered someone who's doing this great work. Sometimes it's translated as the one that knows. There's various different definitions, but you've shared a little bit about how it's defined in this practice. So maybe you want to share about that, and then we can come full spiral to our final topics.
Yeah, one of the ways I've heard it defined that resonates with me the most so far, I mean, all of it does, but a lot is a bridge, like a bridger of two worlds. So one who bridges the like two worlds. And I just feel like the spine is that. And these practices do that. And so in some ways, um, we think of a shaman as a healer, and they are. And a lot of um, what I've experienced in the philosophy and all of these is how do we become our own healer, you know?
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about bridging worlds as one of the um, particularly interesting definitions of shamanism, and you're talking about how that's approached through all of these practices, whether it's dance or network spinal, because it's the spinal network and the central nervous system. The spinal column is bridging the world above and the world below. And it's through this network of information carried by our nervous system that we're connecting the worlds and the different dimensions of our being: physical, energetic, psychic, or psychological, if you prefer that language. But basically, the various densities and subtleties of the vibration of energy that is who we are. And that's kind of carried almost like an antenna by this nervous system.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Well, I don't know if you want to go any more into that, into how you experience that. I've heard you call it a highway between heaven and earth, and also in how you see this network spinal and dance and so on relate. How does this relate to you, to your experience of as now a DJ, which is awesome. I can't wait to hear a live set. But yeah, how do you experience that in relation to like electronic dance music, DJing, sound and music itself in relation to the things we're talking about?
Yeah. Um, well, I've danced my entire life. My parents literally met on the dance floor, so I feel like it was written in the DNA and in my stars a bit. So I inherently resonate with dance and expression and movement. And I also played the piano growing up. My family are all musicians of various sorts. My dad and my mom both. And then my brother and sister, my grandmother, my entire family pretty much. And so I've been surrounded by music my entire life too, music and dance. And I I just think that through sound, because what's cool to me is that they actually figured out that it's not an electrical synapse within network spinal. They figured out it's not an electrical synapse. Sorry about that. That travels through the central nervous system between nerve and nerve, like the synapse, the information, the energy. It's not an electrical synapse, because with an electrical synapse, you get heat production during the process of that. And there's no heat production from that synapse. So what they figured out is that actually an acoustic wave. It's a sound wave. The synaptic wave is a sound wave that travels through the central nervous system. And that sound wave is a sine wave. If you guys are familiar with physics or quantum physics, it's a sine wave that gets distorted based off of all those things that we just talked about: thoughts, toxins, traumas, life experience, etc. And so to me, through sound is also like, it affects our nervous system, right? A lot, quite a bit. It's actually like one of the primordial senses. It's one of the first, the ears, the one of the first things that develop in the womb, and also first, and I've heard before, first there was the sound of Om in the universe. Um, but it's vibration, and it actually supersedes, as long as you have your hearing intact. But even if you don't, all your cells still respond to sound, so it supersedes whether or not you let it into your vessel or not, because sound
Mm-hmm.
is vibration. It's all vibration. And so that's where I love the idea of connecting music, or um sound journeys, with gongs
Mm-hmm.
and singing bowls and all of it, music in general. It's a universal language.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I just love that as a practice, is connecting sound with movement, with breath, with further freedom of expression and being witnessed in that. And it's like, I dance is like, for me, it's one of the most liberating things on this planet, because it's like, I'm going to move my arm like this because I want to, and guess what, I don't care what you think about it, right? As long as we're not like hurting anybody or anything. But it's like, I'm going to move my arm like this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to express like this, and I just don't care what else, like what you think, right?
Mm-hmm.
And more than that, for me, so that's kind of like the mental liberation, but there's also a
Mm-hmm.
physical liberation through like just the movement alone. And
Mm-hmm.
just, again, we're talking about psyche soma connection, so how those two are linked. And to move people, so the 360 emergence, we take people through this journey set, and they've taught us in the program, which I learned to DJ before this, but what's been cool about the 360 is that they've upped my DJ skills by teaching us how to take people through even more of a journey, um, sonically, and through multi-genre music, and also through various tempos, which is not the easiest to blend all the time to actually DJ. So that has been cool to learn that. But yeah, I just love that. I love sound. I love that sound is like unwinding the central nervous system tension of that sine wave, of that sound wave, can also happen through music.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, and
Yeah.
music just is profoundly impactful for us, especially if it has like lyrics sometimes, or just no lyrics, just like the world sounds.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah, and we know that it's got a huge biochemical effect on the human system,
Right,
but
somatics.
right, but it's also, as we're seeing, um, may in some mysterious ways, which aren't all that mysterious, because we know that sound is a wave of vibration, and so there's some way that we are literally resonating with the sounds we're hearing, and these frequencies of light and sound that are reality around us is based, and then we're woven into that and interacting with it. It's curious for me because you've talked a little bit about entrainments, and I know that's a particular practice within, or aspect of, network spinal, which seems sort of related here. One of the last things that we would have time to touch upon, if you want to just very briefly share how that might relate, or what that means, like the entrainment piece of network spinal in relation to these patterns of energy and vibration that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's entrainment is such a fascinating thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And physics, when you have two frequencies and one has more organization to it, and therefore greater coherence to it, and usually it's at least two energy states above this one that has less organization and less coherence, then this one will entrain up to meet this one. So in network spinal, as we're contacting these gateways that we contact with in the entrainment in order to develop these acoustic waves that move through the central channel and also unwind spinal cord tension. As we contact these gateways, there's a big component of meeting that system energetically where it is while holding kind of what's possible at the same time. So we're kind of like we're transcending and including in our awareness. Sorry, my cat is meowing. Nova girl, come here, baby.
That's a good name, Nova.
Nova, she's a good girl. She's just vocal sometimes. Um but yeah, so it's kind of this like process of, it's not bisecting our awareness. It's literally just it. I like to think of it as meeting it where it is energetic. It's like it's
Sure.
transcending and it's expanding our awareness. And so if an entrainment is so much about a participatory thing, it's not me doing something to you,
Mm-hmm.
but we're holding the space for a different reality, if you will, in a
Mm-hmm.
different way, but it's also while simultaneously meeting you where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, yeah, I mean, that's more of the entrainment. And then, through sound, I think you can do the same thing with the dance and everything. Uh,
So it's like holding a certain higher degree of energetic or vibratory coherence
which
in
we're
one's own being and bringing that close to some other uh, wavelength, some other degree of coherence, and helping them come together and helping um, a state of being or a state of vibration, an energetic state that is less coherent and more disorganized to approach that higher degree of organization, sort of being attracted to
exactly.
a slightly up leveled degree of coherence in the way that we are organizing our energy, let's say. So
Yes,
obviously these
yes.
are nuanced and subtle topics, and I think you're touching upon others
But
that would take even more to actually unpack, and I don't think we can today. But
yeah,
did you want to add some last comments about it?
I was just going to say we're in training to each other all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We're in training to each other and our environment all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
so if like somebody walks in the room and they have high energy and there's enough available energy in your system to meet them, you'll actually entrain to meet them. And
Mm-hmm.
vice versa on some level, right? So if it's a really cool thing, but
Mm-hmm.
if they are vibrating at a higher frequency or a more organized and coherent frequency, but it's kind of unstable still, like they're not used to it or something, it's not really ingrained in them, or they still don't have enough energy to maintain that, then they can actually drop down to meet you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting thing, but yeah, we are in training to each other and our environment all day long, every
Mm-hmm.
day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's what happens in the dance too, is we start to entrain to each other through, yeah, I mean, yeah, just through dancing
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's I'll I'll put one last note here on that, which is that I believe there was research done, and people can check this, that is referenced in some Tibetan literature, but it's newer research that shows that if people drum together, or even I think tap along to the same rhythm slightly, for period of, it might have been just minutes, I'm not sure how many, but I think less than half an hour, maybe 5-10 minutes, they actually exhibit, even if they haven't ever met or seen each other, a higher degree of empathy and compassion
Mm,
for each other after drumming together to the same rhythm.
wow.
So, and I believe the way that the study was done was that they didn't see each other. It was like, are they willing to give other participants when told to, maybe like a little shock in a test or something like that? And it's like, we're more compassionate after I guess we could in this conversation, I don't know if the study would agree, but we could say in training ourselves to the same rhythm. Rhythm is very similar to vibration. It's, binary sound and silence. And so across space and time, or I guess time in this case. So anyways, these are very interesting topics. I don't know if I'm doing it justice, but I'd love to keep going, and I think that we will at the retreat. I wish we could today, but if people would like to come, I believe, and maybe we wrap it up with just an exploration, because we've gotten all the way through this episode from physical anatomy, the structure of our spinal column and our physical body working, modalities like chiropractic care and Rolfing, to the self-care that comes with embodied movement practices, disciplines of dance and awareness of our breathing, our bodies, our movement, all the way to the subtler energetic vibrations that are at the heart of all of that. And ultimately, we just barely touched upon consciousness and the psyche, and the sort of consciousness beyond what we're aware of as a underlying fabric. That I think we'll get more into all of these things through our collaboration on the retreat. I don't know if you want to say any last words. I know that you've witnessed some amazing healing effects for people from some of these practices. So I don't know if you want to share any last words of encouragement, or any details about what you'd like to explore further as we continue to work together. But yeah.
I'm just really grateful to be able to collaborate with you, honestly. And really excited to see just where that leads. I think that there's a lot of different territory we can cover. And I'm really excited to join all of these modalities together in one offering, which I have done before, but each time is different. And I'm just excited to do that with you and see like how it's going to go.
Yeah, I'm excited too. The gratitude is mutual. So everybody's invited if they'd like to come and experience Psyche Soma, bridging worlds, the connection between consciousness, energy, matter, embodiment, all of these things. So this is deep and transformative territory that we'll keep exploring together. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Always love seeing
thank
you.
you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Emmy.
Yep. Much love.
Peace. Much love. Peace.